Hi everyone. So I said I'd be back later on when I managed to read the full complaint that's been filed in the California State Superior Court against Bryan Freedman by the estate of Travis Flores. And I now have that. I've already kind of skimmed over it once and effed and jeffed my entire way through it. So hopefully I will have already got a lot of that out of my system. It is a long document. It's hold on, I'm sharing the wrong tab. It's a long document. It's I think 67 pages long, so I am not going to read every single word by any stretch. But I am going to just go over some of it because I think some of the comments are a bit outlandish. I think the language in it the tone is incredibly aggressive. And whilst I appreciate, this is the administrator of a grieving spouse and family, the administrators of Travis Flores' estate, there's a lot in there which I think is rather unnecessary. So I'm gonna make a point of saying that anything I say in this is just my opinion, and I will be as respectful as possible to Travis Flores, to his and his family. I got no intention of saying, being mean to anyone. But I wanted to look into this lawsuit because I looked into the original one quite heavily before. So I just wanted to see, what is this about? Yeah, let's have a look at it then. So I also want to say as well, Clement Sioi, I may be saying his name wrong, and I am incredibly sorry if I am. He is actually a California entertainment lawyer, like Bryan Freedman. Just wanted to provide that context, because I didn't in my previous video. But yes, he is a lawyer himself. Is the spouse of Travis Flores and the administrator of Flores' estate. Okay. So, first up, he is suing both Bryan Freedman and Freedman's law firm. Obviously, the start is the usual, the jurisdiction and venue statements. So then we got the parties there. So obviously, Clement Sioi is the surviving spouse and duly appointed administrator of the estate of Flores. He's bringing the action on behalf of himself and the estate of Flores, and in his representative capacity. So we know who Bryan Freedman is. We all know now who Freedman's firm is, LFTC. So we've got some background facts. Flores passed away on May 23rd, 2024. As discussed in greater detail below, Travis was very ill and particularly vulnerable. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. That's fair. Before he died, Travis retained Bryan Freedman of LFTC to represent him against Justin Baldoni and other defendants in a federal copyright infringement action later captioned Travis Flores against Justin Baldoni, Caleb Remington, Wayfarer Entertainment, Well Entertainment, Lionsgate Inc., CBS Films Inc., and Ambry Genetics Corporation. So we've got the case number and everything all there. Freedman initially took on the federal case, charged Travis a large amount of money up front, then filed a complaint. And I just want to give a bit of context here, right? Because it is not unusual. I don't love the way this has been framed. Charged a large amount of money up front. That is normal. attorneys charge retainers. To give you a comparison, when the content creators were subpoenaed, there are at least 2 that I know of. I'm naming no one, but there are at least 2 that I know of who were charged a minimum, just to deal with a non-party subpoena, they were charged a minimum of $20,000. Well, they were asked for, they were quoted for, they wanted the lawyers that these 2 content creators were in talks with and consulting with, they were notified that, if the content creators wanted the lawyers to act on their behalf, they would be expected to pay 20, 25, some of them much more even, up front. And that was just a non-party subpoena. So this was an entire lawsuit. So we don't see here how much he was charged up front. There was no context to say how much, what that was for. But I mean, in the UK as well, people, it's common practice to have money put on account before doing any work. And it's usually in the thousands. It's not, do the work and then get paid. So I'm frustrated. It's a series of comments like that, which without the context, people would be like, oh my God, that's terrible. It's perfectly normal practice. But it's being framed as something nefarious, something, something like greedy or just, like he was trying to take advantage of this vulnerable man. Anyway. See, this is why I'm glad I got the swearing out my system earlier. Otherwise, I'd be like, F and blinding, effing and blinding. Okay. When defendant Freedman received the opening Rule 12b6 motion to dismiss from opposing counsel for Justin Baldoni and other defendants, he immediately advised Travis's case had no chance of success and should be promptly dismissed. Again, I'm going to pause, right? That happens. What looks like it's a strong case at the start, as you move on through and find out more information, more facts and evidence comes to light, you are constantly reassessing the prospects of the case. And if information comes to light, then the chance, you might change your mind and think that a case that you once thought was solid is now no longer solid. And then you start looking for a way to get out. Maybe you should consider a settlement, because if this goes to trial, we will probably lose because they got this evidence. That happens all the time. Again, another normal practice. I don't love how these things are being framed, and it only gets worse. Defendant attorney Freedman next prepared and told Travis not only to sign a full settlement under which Travis received absolutely nothing, but then also instructed Travis to sign a separate comprehensive release of any and all liability to the defendants. But Travis's family's next major shock occurred when they learned that defendant Bryan Freedman had jumped over to begin representing Justin Baldoni in litigation involving movie stars Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. Plaintiff did not learn of attorney Bryan Freedman's shifting loyalties from attorney Freedman or anyone else in his law firm, as one would expect under the rules that regulate attorney conduct in the state of California. I found this odd, and I don't know if it's because the rules are different in Britain. Scenario: if I represented A in a lawsuit against B, and then years later, for a completely unrelated lawsuit, B, retained me to represent them in an unrelated lawsuit against unrelated parties. I have never heard of a rule where you have to inform your previous clients, even if you have previously represented them in a lawsuit against your new current clients, because it would have no relevance. So, I mean, if there's an American law or a California law that says there is an obligation, then that's fine. I'm not aware of it. But like in the UK, that's a really bizarre rule. Instead, after Travis's death at age 33, and bear in mind, Freedman was retained after Travis Flores had passed away, and had actually passed away some 7 months before being retained. His two families and plaintiff learned, instead, after Travis's death at 33, his two families and plaintiff learned about Freedman's conduct from the media and the reporters who began calling plaintiff and the family members during the Baldoni Lively Reynolds media storm. The grieving plaintiff and the family members did not wish to be drawn into a media firestorm after losing Travis. And I 100% agree with that. That's absolutely fair. No problem with that. I wouldn't want that either. If I was in that position, neither would I want that. However, Shane Norman was subjected to the same treatment, Shane Norman being the other Justin Baldoni lawsuit that went nowhere. Shane Norman was contacted and harassed and, had his lawsuit being brought up largely by Blake Lively supporters, in fairness. And he actually went on Reddit and said, "Can you please leave me out of this lawsuit? I don't want to be dragged into it." The lawsuit was years before, has nothing to do with the case now against Lively, the merits of it. Neither does the lawsuit against Travis Flores, for that matter. Any more than, the case of Marilyn Starkloff against Aviation Gin and Ryan Reynolds has anything to do with the Lively case or the merits of Blake Lively's lawsuit, or Ryan Reynolds' defense before the Wayfarer lawsuit was dismissed. So I understand what they're saying. I do agree with that. The problem I have with this point, though, is it is not Justin Baldoni's fault. It is not Wayfarer's fault, and it is not even Bryan Freedman's fault if people are making contact with the family. They're making contact with Freedman and the parties, Wayfarer and Justin Baldoni too, and probably asking them about this lawsuit. It's completely irrelevant, but that's the media, and it's not. Bryan Freedman is being put in the same position in that sense of being hounded and asked questions about old previous lawsuits as Travis Flores's family were. He didn't ask for it, and he wasn't running around giving interviews. He was approached and he gave a diplomatic response, which we will get to. Unbeknownst to plaintiff, Attorney Freedman had begun openly discussing Travis, his confidential attorney-client communications, and his low opinion on the merits of Travis's case that Freedman had filed to the media and the general public. Freedman, among many remarks, explained that Travis's opponents did nothing wrong and that Justin Baldoni is exceedingly honourable. Right. So I think I did say this in the case earlier. There was no breach of attorney-client privilege. The information that I think Freedman just gave one statement. I mean, they're making it sound like he'd done a whole press tour. He'd given one blanket statement when asked, how could you represent these people when you already took them on in court for someone else, etc., etc. And he gave a blanket statement of, well, look, actually, no liability was determined. They weren't found liable for anything, and that's true, because Travis Flores, as I showed earlier, filed a request to the court to asking the judge to dismiss his lawsuit against Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer, amongst other people and companies, with prejudice, seeking no award of attorney's fees or costs. And Baldoni and Wayfarer did not pay any settlement. Not that settlement is an admission of liability. And I explained that in great detail when I talked about how Caleb Remington was the only defendant in that lawsuit who had negotiated a settlement with Flores. Now, this is the first time hearing that nothing was paid out, but that's a separate issue. That's not related to Justin Baldoni or Wayfarer. And it's not related to Bryan Freedman. Bryan Freedman was not representing Caleb Remington. So it's got nothing to do with Freedman, his firm, or Wayfarer. So, and the information, and that information as well about, the fact that Baldoni and Wayfarer were not held liable for anything, it's publicly available information. It's on Pacer. It's on Court Listener. So that's not attorney-client privileged. Now, if Freedman had, discussed the terms of the settlement with Caleb Remington, then yes, that would be breaching attorney-client privilege. But to say, well, yes, I represented these people in a previous lawsuit, it's public knowledge. No determination of liability was ever made against them. That's true. It's also public knowledge. And then the second part of it, Justin Baldoni, exceedingly honourable. I already said before, that I believe is actually an opinion I think Bryan Freedman had formed due to the way he handled Blake Lively. How he'd kind of kept his cool and everything, and not got angry in any way, not retaliated, for want of a better word, but had just kind of tried to manage the situation, tried to appease her. So, and been respectful to her as well. So that's, and if that's the case, then Bryan Freedman is perfectly entitled to form an opinion, both personal and professional, about another person, whether he has defended a client against that person or not in a previous lawsuit. And that has nothing to do with attorney-client privilege. So if he has seen evidence or actions from Justin Baldoni or Wayfarer that give him the impression that Justin Baldoni is honourable, then he's allowed to express that opinion. And this is where we start getting a bit of aggression then. Plaintiff had not only the side-by-side story analysis as described below, but texts that refuted Justin Baldoni's fake statements. Contrary to Travis's lawyer's gushing comments about his new client, Justin Baldoni's character, plaintiff's opinion of Justin Baldoni, based on facts, is that he is a thief and a liar. See, and this is now where it starts to feel like a hit piece. And then we get more hearsay. And as more than one reporter noted, and as one may see in the media stories, The habits of defendant Bryan Freedman's law practice are not to zealously and conscientiously represent his client. Rather, as plaintiff witness firsthand, Freedman engages in deception, dishonesty to his clients and the general public, and manipulation. The public witnesses Bryan Freedman litigate almost all of his cases in the media spotlight. Then he proceeds to lose his cases in open court. When you take a case to court, you have a 50-50 chance of winning. I shouldn't have to highlight the obvious, but you go into a court case and you can win or you can lose. He peddles promises to his clients under the guise of legal services. In fact, by the time plaintiff finally got back Travis's legal file from Freedman, which took weeks, it was less than a quarter-inch thick, which probably equated to $2,000 to $3,000 per page. Defendants had sanitized the attorney-client file of all meetings and telephone notes, texts, drafts, etc. So then we get some backstory then, which I won't go into too much. Travis Flores was born with cystic fibrosis. He was one of less than 30 people who had undergone 3 double lung transplants. In 2012, he began developing a screenplay titled 3 Feet Distance, for which he registered a copyright in 2015. The characters in his script are based on his real-life friendships and the experiences of his short life while battling chronic cystic fibrosis. On March 15th, 2019, a major motion picture, curiously titled 5 Feet Apart, had a wide release. It was purportedly created and directed by Justin Baldoni and written by Mickey Daltrey and Tobias Iaconis. The movie is allegedly inspired by the life of cystic fibrosis activist Claire Wineland, who reached millions through social media while she was battling her illness. So, and then we go on and learn a bit. Both Claire Wineland and Travis Flores were on My Last Days. I don't think they were on at the same time. Travis Flores, like Claire Wineland, also participated in the series hosted by Justin Baldoni, and together they reached a wide audience through their own storytelling. Both Travis and Claire were cast on the CW program, and Travis, like Claire Wineland, also met and knew Justin Baldoni, and suffice it to say that Travis's opinion of Baldoni was not a good one. For instance, after Travis discovered that Justin Baldoni had used his ideas through their communications and stole his copyrighted story, Travis said, Justin hopes we die before we catch up to him. That seems really extreme. While Justin Baldoni might look good up on the screen mouthing other people's words from the script, his true character is very different, and he emits a bad and dishonest energy, as Travis explained. And then we go over some of the figures of what the film's budget and what its earnings were. In short, Baldoni stole the script and the ideas and dialogue that Travis had shared with him. And I'm going to contradict that right now. Let's have a look. Yes, okay. I'm just going to share this quickly. This is the actual complaint from the original lawsuit. This is Travis Flores's complaint. Okay, so these are his words, obviously represented by Freedman's firm. In January 2017, defendant CBS Films announced that it had decided to begin development of an untitled film from defendant Justin Baldoni and his production company, Defendant Wayfarer Entertainment, about teens with CF, which would be Baldoni's feature film debut, both as a director and a producer. The year after the announcement of Baldoni's untitled film, Baldoni asked Flores to appear in a documentary series called My Last Days about young people with terminal illnesses. So, although it didn't have a title, the premise of the film was announced a year before Baldoni met Travis Flores. He continues, Flores agreed, but made a concerted effort to avoid disclosing any portion of 3 feet distance to Baldoni. So he went out of his way to hide his work, which is not what was just said in this new complaint, because the new complaint said, in short, Baldoni stole the script and the ideas and dialogue that Travis had shared with him. Flores kept his screenplay from Baldoni both because Flores had a policy of keeping his work confidential and because Baldoni was working on the feature film project that Flores viewed as competitive. So that's really contradictory. Aside from the similar, near identical title, Travis noticed the striking similarities between Travis's screenplay 3 Feet Distance and Baldoni's film 5 Feet Apart, right down to page, line, and scene that were undoubtedly aided by the strong connection between Justin Baldoni and Travis Flores while working together. Travis, who was very ill and vulnerable, ultimately made the difficult decision to pursue legal action against Justin Baldoni to recognize his ownership of the copyrighted story. And I'll just say, there was a good chance, actually, that a lot of the ideas were lifted from Travis Flores' work. I'm not saying that's not the case at all, actually, because Caleb Remington, who has cystic fibrosis himself, the script for 3 Feet Distance was shared with Ambry Genetics, one of the defendants from the original lawsuit, and they shared it with Caleb Remington before Caleb Remington was brought on to the film 5 Feet Apart as a consultant about cystic fibrosis. I don't for a second believe that Justin Baldoni had any idea that the information that Caleb Remington was given may or may not have been from Travis Flores' script. So I'm not saying that it did come from the script, and I'm not saying it didn't because I don't know, but I'm saying that there is the possibility, and I'm very open to that possibility, that some of the work from some of Travis Flores' work did actually end up in the film, but not knowingly by Wayfarer or Baldoni. At the end of the day, Caleb Remington was also the one that agreed to a settlement. So, who knows? We don't know the full story there. But Travis Flores, by his own words in his original complaint, confirms that he did not share his work with Justin Baldoni. He actually went out of his way to keep it from him. And the film had already been kind of announced. It didn't have a title, but the premise of it all had been announced a year before Baldoni even met Flores. And I think that's really important. So then they talk about Travis Flores retaining Freedman to file the copyright infringement case. Plaintiff was present at every meeting and privy to every detail of the litigation process, including meetings, conversations, and initial agreement, filing of the complaint, and motion to dismiss filed by your opposing parties, as should be the case. But lawyers work with their clients for their clients. They don't, very unusual, but, you rarely will you find a situation where a lawyer will just go and take over a case and run it without, involving their client. Because they are acting on behalf of the client. Before filing this complaint, plaintiff consulted with 3 senior attorneys who confirmed that Freedman's work was limited and inadequate. Right, so he went to 3 other attorneys who Freedman's probably rubbed up the wrong way. I bet if you look closely enough, it'll probably be, there's a good chance it could be like Manat. It could be, it could be ties somewhere to Blake Lively. That'll be the next deep dive. Like the amicus briefs. Again, my opinion only. Freedman's work was limited and inadequate, consisting of taking on a case only to then conclude the case was meritless with the first filing of the other side's opening federal rules of civil procedure. Well, that hasn't happened, has it, so far, with Blake Lively's case? Apparently, Freedman's handling of the case raised eyebrows among the lawyers. Even more damaging to defendant Bryan Freedman is that there are texts and potential witnesses which show Justin Baldoni lied about the origin of the script. Then, on or about December 26, 2024, through the media, plaintiff first learned that Bryan Freedman actually jumped over to represent Justin Baldoni, the defendant in Travis's case against the actress Blake Lively, in a very high-profile public sexual harassment and defamation action. And now we come to the height of stupidity and ridiculous. Defendant Bryan Freedman simply traded up his valuable client and sacrificed seriously ill client Travis Flores in order to gain the more lucrative and healthier client Justin Baldoni. I'm not actually sure what the hell they are accusing Bryan Freedman of here, because I'm sure the vast majority of clients, not just Justin Baldoni, but Freedman's firm's clients, entire client portfolio, are healthier than Travis Flores. I think this is just absolutely ridiculous. He's clearly not traded up. The lawsuit was settled in 2022. Flores had passed away in May 2024. Freedman was not retained for this lawsuit until December 2024. He could not foresee back in 2022 that Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer were going to get sued by Blake Lively. Even at the time that Travis Flores passed away, he could not have foreseen that because he was not retained at that point. And even if he was, it is irrelevant. There is no conflict of interest. I find this so ridiculous. And it's not like Justin Baldoni is Bryan Freedman's biggest client. Travis's family, who wished to maintain their privacy after losing their son, Travis, were deluged with media calls. This is because attorney defendant Freedman played out his loathsome behavior in the media spotlight. He didn't even say anything about this. This was news outlets just reaching out because they'd discovered the lawsuit. It's got nothing to do with Freedman. This is really frustrating and hard to read. Freedman began openly discussing the facts of Travis's case, attorney-client competences, and his various opinions of the merits of Travis's case. I've already covered that. No, that was not what happened. One statement, nothing that breached attorney-client privilege. And the merits of the case were that the claims were withdrawn. That's public information. I've come to that conclusion myself. Just reading the documents. Just some of Attorney Freedman's public comments include, but are not limited to, in the copyright infringement case, I learned what great people Justin and Wayfarer were. I learned that they did absolutely nothing wrong, and there was no liability on their part whatsoever. As a result, the case was resolved without any liability on Justin's or Wayfarer or any other dependent's part. This only further confirmed to me that Justin and Wayfarer are exceedingly honourable and highly ethical. None of that statement is attorney-client privileged. Freedman seems to be in violation of rules of professional conduct 1.1, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, and 1.9, California Business and Professional Code, Section 6104, and California Evidence Code, Section 953, as discussed immediately below. I'm not going to go into huge detail, but yeah, this is just defendant's obligation as California attorneys require them to absolutely protect his vulnerable client's confidentiality, including all attorney-client privileged information, attorney-client work product, intellectual property rights, etc. And these obligations survived the death of Travis Flores. And that's true, because it was a federal case, privileges do survive the death of the client. However, I've not seen anything that would come under attorney-client privilege. Because if it was privileged, this information was privileged, it would be sealed. And it's not. Well, it wouldn't even be sealed. It would be, it wouldn't be shared at all. It wouldn't be on the docket. But, as Lyman often says, there is a public interest. Hence, the documents are on the docket for everyone to read, and Freedman has not gone beyond those bounds. Other than personal opinions on Wayfarer and Justin Baldoni, which he's allowed to make. Yeah, it says, right. Defendants represented Mr. Flores on a federal question in a federal court, and the attorney-client privilege survives Travis Flores' death. This is crucial because it means that all privileged communications between Mr. Flores and defendant Freedman remain protected, right down to the present today. This includes defendant Bryan Freedman's discussions in his conflicted representation with Justin Baldoni and the media on what occurred, and defendant's legal opinion on the merit of Travis's case. But Freedman was not giving Travis Flores' opinion. He wasn't sharing any information that Travis Flores had shared. That was his own personal opinion. Moreover, this right is now in plaintiff's hands as the administrator of the estate. Defendants' failure to uphold their clients' competences and privileged communications, despite the federal law's clear mandate, is a very serious breach of ethical and professional responsibilities required of any lawyer licensed by the state of California. This failure not only compromises the particular client's rights, like Travis, but also undermines the legal profession's core commitment to confidentiality and the public trust. I'm going to try and skim a bit because I'm only on page 10 out of 62 and I don't want to be here for ages doing this. So he's saying that there are multiple statements, just, but the thing is, he's repeating the same statement. And while asked, for example, about Freedman's previous case against Justin Baldoni, Freedman is quoted in US Weekly on January 23rd, 2025. I learned that Justin and Wayfarer did absolutely nothing wrong. There's no liability on their part whatsoever. Blah, blah, blah. This only further confirmed to me that Justin and Wayfarer are exceedingly honourable and highly ethical. So this guy is going after that one statement back in January. This is apparently a classic example of tossing a client under the bus. But even more important, defendant Bryan Freedman was aware, or should have been aware, that had he been a competent lawyer, so this is lawyer, one lawyer's opinion of another lawyer, that his words were at variance with the truth. Even more important, defendants and defendant Bryan Freedman's public statements in particular clearly indicate that Mr. Freedman had developed a relationship with Mr. Baldoni during or prior to the litigation, the process only confirming Mr. Freedman's high view of Mr. Baldoni. But that's horseshit. You can admire someone without developing any kind of relationship with them. If you're involved in something, you can admire that person for conduct. I admire Ellen's filings. I don't have a relationship with her. I just see her conduct. I see her filings. I see the way she argues and reasons, her use of case law, and I like it. I like her style. I like Fritz's style. I don't have a relationship with him. This is just so stupid. This is speculation. Moreover, by defending the character of his new A-list client, Justin Baldoni's not on A-list. Blake Lively's not even an A-list. Mr. Freedman appears to undermine his deceased client, Travis Flores. These statements not only discuss the merits of the initial claim, but are also offensive to the memory of Mr. Flores, who is not here to defend his name and honour in the papers against the statements of his own attorneys. Most important, and just say though, right, I appreciate that Travis Flores is not here. And I say that all the time to Blake Lively supporters who throw around the lawsuit as some kind of, weapon to, have a dig and all that. And I just think it's tasteless the way they do it, and they should leave it go. And one of the key arguments I always say is, look, he's not here to defend himself. He's not here to speak for himself, so you should not be speaking for him. However, there's also the fact that lawsuits are public and people are going to talk about them even after one of the parties has passed away. That happens. And you can't sit there and say, well, he's not here to defend himself, so don't talk about it. But that's not how it works. Most important, the comments and many others are fundamental betrayal of the core value of trust that members of the public must place in their representation when they hire a California lawyer. Travis had a right to expect confidentiality and loyalty from his trusted lawyer, Bryan Freedman, and this trust was betrayed. Discoveries will show that Freedman violated the trust invested by other clients in defendant Bryan Freedman. Discoveries will show that defendant Freedman violated the trust invested by other clients in defendant Bryan Freedman. Additionally, on information and belief, the handling of work product associated with dependents' representation, and that the confidentiality and integrity of such materials were not maintained, both during the course of representation and after its conclusion. What materials? Their failure to safeguard or protect those materials would constitute a significant breach of ethical obligations and would indicate broader issues with his adherence to professional standards of client care. I'm wondering if this is the records. It could be about the records that they requested back. And it depends when they requested them as well, because to my knowledge, if I remember correctly, Freedman lost his firm, or his firm was damaged by fire. So could that be missing because of the fire damage? I don't know. Oh yeah, it is the papers. The two additional points hammer this home. First, when plaintiff requested Travis's attorney-client file from Bryan Freedman, plaintiff learned the file consists of less than 25 pages. There are no emails with opposing counsel, no meeting or phone notes, no text, no drafts or research as one would expect. Instead, the file delivered to plaintiff after repeated requests over weeks by attorney Bryan Turnour of LFTC is threadbare. It was clearly sanitized to remove any of the dealings with Mr. Baldoni and his counsel. The second point, as noted, plaintiff has the text with the family of Claire Wineland, which confirmed she did not participate in nor write Baldoni's version of the story. So defendant Bryan Freedman's public statements on behalf of his other client, Justin Baldoni, about the merits of the case were demonstrably false. Well, I mean, Claire Wineland did appear in promotion. She appeared in media posts anyway, as the film was being produced. I think she passed away just before the film was released. I can't be 100% sure on that without looking it up, but or not long after the film was, it was something like that. I don't know how involved she was in it. I don't think she said she was involved. I think the story was just based on her story. And that's been something that she's never refuted. And likewise, she is not here to speak for herself. Justin Baldoni stole the storyline and grossed $90+ million from a man, Travis Flores, who he knew to be very seriously ill and vulnerable. Bryan Freedman's fatal conflict of interest. It's unclear when the relationship between defendant Freedman and Justin Baldoni blossomed. Jesus. Freedman should have been aware of the conflict of interest in representing Mr. Baldoni while also representing Mr. Flores. He wasn't representing him though. A conflict of interest arises when an attorney's interests or those of a different client conflict with the interests of the present client. Attorneys have a duty to zealously represent the interests of their client and must avoid situations where these duties conflict. This conflict of interest was never disclosed to Travis and/or plaintiff, but it compromised his legal standing and was only later revealed by the press in the most callous and brutal way possible. Freedman's decision to represent Baldoni, the opposing party in Mr. Flores' case, and to make public comments against the interests of Travis Flores, plaintiff, and his family is an egregious violation of ethical principles and demonstrates a blatant disregard for his fiduciary duty owed to his former client. Freedman made knowingly false and defamatory statements to the media concerning the merits of Travis's case. Defamation refers to any statement made by a person, whether verbal or printed, that causes harm to another person's reputation or character. Mr. Freedman publicly defamed his client, Travis Flores' character, which negatively impacted his memory and family. If we are to believe defendant Bryan Freedman, then Travis Flores did not write the script in question, and his case against Justin Baldoni was meritless. According to Travis's lawyers, defendant Bryan Freedman, it is Justin Baldoni who has a wonderful character, while defendant's client, Travis Flores, is not to be trusted. They're really twisting the words here. That's not how I don't think that's how people took that statement. I didn't sit there and think, oh, well, Travis Flores was, lying. It's perfectly reasonable. I haven't seen his script, but it's perfectly reasonable that two people had a very similar idea. We were. They could have just had a similar idea at the same time. And as I said, it could well have been, influenced to include part of Travis Flores' story because of Caleb Remington's consultation. Defendant Freedman's grotesque public display led to plaintiff's family being persistently contacted by the police during the media hurricane. That absolutely was not Freedman. They were already lively supporters were all over that lawsuit. They really leapt on, oh my God, Justin Baldoni got sued by a dead guy. Literally, that's what I had being sent to me at the start of this lawsuit. Oh my God, how could you support someone who sues dead people? Shane Norman one, it was how could you support someone who's so racist? He was sued by a black man. I had all of that. That was lively supporters that did that, not Bryan Freedman. So then they whinge. Freedman breached his duty to return the complete client file. I'm not going to comment on it though too much because we don't know. I've got the causes of action here. More than anything, I would be interested to see Freedman's response, and I'll do a separate video on that. So first cause of action is breach of contract. Second cause of action is breach of fiduciary duty. I'll go into this in more depth, maybe on a separate video, but I'm just covering it more basically for now. Third cause of action for legal malpractice. Fourth cause of action is for invasion of privacy. Fifth cause of action is defamation. Prayer for relief. Wherefore, plaintiff individually and in his capacity as a court-appointed administrator of the estate of Flores respectfully request that the court enter judgment in their favour and against defendants Freedman and LFTC and award the following relief. General and special damages, an amount to be proven at trial, but not limited to damages for emotional distress, reputational harm, loss of legal claims, and financial injury to the estate. Punitive and exemplary damages pursuant to California Civil Code 3294 to punish defendants for their willful, malicious, fraudulent, and oppressive conduct. Restitution and disgorgement of all legal fees paid to defendants by Travis Flores or his estates on the grounds of unjust enrichment and breach of fiduciary duty. So looking for all the legal fees that were paid for the original lawsuit. Injunctive relief, including but not limited to an order prohibiting defendants from further disclosing confidential attorney-client communications or making public statements regarding Travis Flores or his legal matters. Declaratory relief that defendants violated their ethical and legal obligations to Travis Flores and his estate. An order compelling production of the complete and unredacted attorney-client file, including all communications drafts, meetings and phone notes, email correspondence, and communications within the meaning of California Evidence Code Section 952 related to the representation of Travis Flores. Costs of suit, including reasonable attorney's fees incurred by the estate of Flores in prosecuting this action. So they want fees for this action too. Pre-judgment and post-judgment interest as permitted by law. Such other and further relief as the court may deem just and proper. Okay. So let's see. Exhibit A. Oh, okay. So we have Exhibit A, which is the retainer agreement. $675 an hour for Freedman. I mean, they're not unreasonable rates. Look at this. An upfront fee, $20,000. Exactly what a couple of the content creators who had their data subpoenaed in the X and Google subpoenas were quoted for representation in just trying to quash the subpoena. So that's normal. Okay. Okay, so here's the article. They make this sound like this is a quote by Justin Baldoni. My own lawyer once sued me. I do not believe that Justin Baldoni ever said that. No, he didn't. So basically, this is now the third article, which has just got the same quote, but it looks like it's just a quote that's been sent out at the same time. Yeah, it's the same story in multiple news articles, and it's been stretched to sound like, he's repeated himself over and over and over again. That's that. So I'm going to just leave it there. I wanted to touch on that story. I think this is going to be a wild one. I will follow this one actually, just to see what happens with it. I'm interested to see what Freedman responds with. Even if all of this stuff is true, just to play devil's advocate for a minute here, because we have what is publicly available. We don't know what was behind the scenes. If there's text messages that actually contradict stuff, then that needs to be kind of acknowledged. Even if all this is true, though, and Freedman did mishandle Travis Flores' lawsuit, that still doesn't prove Justin Baldoni and Wayfarer are, that they sexually harassed and retaliated against Blake Lively. It doesn't prove that they asked Freedman to do anything. I've seen absolutely no evidence, and there's no evidence in that complaint that Freedman and Justin Baldoni have been, they've had a professional relationship of any kind before December. It's speculated, but Freedman has said in the Lively lawsuit repeatedly that he was engaged by Baldoni in December. There was talk of hiring him between Melissa Nathan and I think it was Justin Baldoni back in July or August last year. But that actually seems to back up for me the fact that Freedman wasn't hired at that point, wasn't retained by Justin Baldoni, and was not acting as his attorney at that point. So, this will be interesting. Again, I still don't love the timing of this. I really don't. But, there you go. Okay, thank you for watching, and I will catch you. Hopefully the Sarowitz recording is going to be out soon. I have seen the new contract, the Blake Inc. contract. It seems pretty standard. There's a few things in there, so I might do a short separate video for that tomorrow. But for the most part, it's quite a standard contract and nothing leapt out at me. Okay, I'll see you later. Bye.